Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Slaybaugh, editor of Backyard Poultry Magazine. And for everyone here, I would like to welcome our small flock owners and the media who are spending time with us this morning during our Healthy Chickens video series. Today, we're going to start by updating everyone on the spread of the avian flu virus, where it is today. We're going to talk with our doctors who will discuss how this affects small flock poultry owners and what small flock poultry owners can do about it. In the middle, we'll talk with Alexandra Douglas, who raises poultry commercially, and talk about how she manages risk on her farm before returning to the doctors for a discussion about general best practices for coop biosecurity. If you have any questions, contact us at backyardpoultrymag@swiftcom.com. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, Purina Animal Nutrition, for helping make this event possible. To get started, I'm going to turn to Dr. Cheryl Davison, Director of the Laboratory of Avian Medicine and Pathology at the University of Pennsylvania in Agriculture, spokesperson for PennVet. Dr. Davison, can you catch us up to date on the avian influenza spread across North America, from how it started to where it is today?
Yes, what we believe had happened was the avian influenza virus, which is an H5N2 highly pathogenic virus, entered into the United States in wild birds on the West Coast. Then it did spread through the other three flyways into other poultry flocks. Some of the poultry flocks are commercial flocks, but other flocks are also backyard flocks, but the majority are commercial flocks. They include layer birds and also turkeys. So the initial introduction is through wild birds. The geese and the ducks can carry the virus and not be sick with a particular virus. So their droppings are where the infectious virus can be. And this is, we're going to talk a little bit about biosecurity today, and that's an important aspect of it, that if people are going out and about and they may be in areas where ducks and geese are, that make sure they're clean coming back into their coop. But so far, it has not gotten into the Atlantic flyway. States and the USDA and the industry are taking measures to monitor for this, and to also the flocks that are affected will get euthanized and disposed of, and it isn't a very serious disease that we have going on throughout the United States.
Thanks, Dr. Davison. Can you give us some perspective, I guess? How big is this outbreak compared to others historically?
There was an outbreak back in 1983-84, which primarily was in Pennsylvania. It did affect a few flocks in surrounding states, but the majority was in Pennsylvania. This was a highly pathogenic virus. It originally started as a mild disease or a low pathogenic virus in April of that year of 1983, and then it turned into a highly pathogenic virus in October of that particular year. And that in that particular outbreak, we lost 17 million birds with a cost of $60 million. This particular outbreak is bigger than that outbreak that occurred in 83, 84, because it has spread to many different states across the country. So the outbreak what I've seen in the past.
Great. I guess to take a step back, can you explain what avian influenza is and what symptoms would separate it from other diseases?
Yes, let's talk a little bit about avian influenza. Avian influenza is a virus, and you hear the term H5N2. What is the H and what is the N? The H is the hemagglutinin or protein on the surface of the virus. The N is the neuraminidase. And so you hear H5N2, and there are many different H types, but the ones that we're concerned about are the H5s and the H7s. And those historically can be a mild form of the disease, but then through mutation can turn to be a highly pathogenic form or the more severe form of the disease. And that's what happened in 83, 84. And this particular virus that's circulating in the United States now came to us through the wild birds as a highly pathogenic virus. So that's the basis of the particular virus. It is a respiratory disease primarily, can cause some neurologic disease in birds, but very high mortality. And we'll talk a little bit more about clinical signs, et cetera, but very high mortality in these flocks. And the mortality can go up to 100% with this particular virus.
and that's why we're taking this so seriously. Is this a human health issue or a food safety issue?
This is not a human health issue or a food safety issue. So let's first start on the human health side. This particular virus has been in other areas of the world before and has not gone into people and caused illness in people. The CDC indicates right now that this is not an immediate concern for people. They do monitor the situation to make sure that that doesn't change. But right now, that is not a concern. And this is not a food safety issue. In the United States, we do surveillance and extensive surveillance for avian influenza. And the flocks that are negative can go to market. If those flocks are ever positive, they don't enter the food chain. And the flocks that are affected don't enter the food chain. They are euthanized and they do not enter the food chain. So again, human health wise, CDC is watching it. It is not an immediate concern for people. And then secondly, this is not a food safety concern.
Great, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Last question for you on this. What action, if any, should backyard poultry owners take now that they know the outbreak is spreading?
The important thing and the biggest thing that we can talk about today is biosecurity. And what does that mean? That means really reducing your risk of bringing a disease into your flock, whether it's avian influenza, whether it's mycoplasma, bronchitis, whatever the disease may be, the infectious disease. You don't want to bring it into your birds. You should practice excellent biosecurity, which means dedicated footwear, dedicated clothes going into your coop. Don't go visit other people's birds and then come back to your coop and just go right into your coop. So one thing is biosecurity. The other thing is to stay informed. And I think it's very important that the listeners and the viewers today go to the USDA website and look at that particular website. It gives an update of avian influenza and where it is in the country. But also, there's an excellent biosecurity manual on that website that goes over biosecurity for small flock owners. And that is an excellent resource for people. So be informed and practice excellent biosecurity.
Great, thanks. And we'll talk all about biosecurity in the last portion of this segment, so that's a good lead-in. We're going to turn to Dr. Gordon Ballum, who is the Director of Lifestyle Innovation and Technical Service for Purina Animal Nutrition, and works with topics like avian influenza disease, and is concerned, as well as focused on nutrition, obviously, with his work with Purina. What kinds of conversations do you have, Dr. Ballum, with your peers about the spread of the disease, and what do you think flock owners should know?
Well, thanks, Ryan. I think the most important aspect to this that we talk about is marrying up good nutrition with sound management. And just to give you an indication, we're over a 100-year-old company, but the very foundation of that company, the cornerstone upon which Purina was built, was good nutrition and sound management. And so, in order to support optimal health and production of your birds, you can't have one without the other. Nutrition is important because it helps keep you healthy. If we become tired, run down, don't eat, we're more susceptible to catching a cold. And it's the same for chickens. So what this means to the person who cares for their bird is to feed them a complete feed from a reputable company, because that feed will have all the nutrients, including essential vitamins, antioxidants, and minerals that are critical for health. It also means that you shouldn't feed more than a combined total of about 10% of scratch grains, treats, and table scraps. I know it's fun to watch your birds eat these types of supplements, but if they're given in excess, they dilute the critical balance of nutrients that are in the complete feed. And these critical nutrients are essential for supporting good bird health. I'd also like to mention that feeding diets containing prebiotics and probiotics can help support digestive health, which in turn supports a healthy immune system. However, again, we can talk we want to focus on good nutrition because it's important for bird health. But I also need to provide a cautionary statement, which is this. if your chickens are as healthy as an ox, they can still be susceptible to illness if exposed to pathogenic organisms. And that's why sound management and sanitation is so important. Sound management and sanitation help reduce the potential risk. They don't eliminate the risk, but certainly help to significantly reduce the risk that your birds can catch some type of an illness.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Ballum. And I'll ask this to both you and Dr. Davison. Are you getting more questions from the public now that the news is hitting, and what are kind of some of those most popular questions that you're getting? Dr. Ballum?
Yes, so we have a lot of concern, not only with owners of backyard birds, but also people such as our retailers that are concerned that they will do something for the disease. And so, we're trying to provide them with good information in terms of what they need to be doing from a biosecurity aspect when they are and or if they have a chance to go to the people's farm. So again, we would recommend something like that. We would recommend that they wear plastic boots that are different than their normal shoes, and as soon as they come off the farm is to clean those boots and then go back and put on their regular shoes. So again, we're getting those types of questions, and we're providing some types of recommendations for strict biosecure programs for them as they visit the different farms.
Dr. Davison, are you hearing similar questions, or are you getting different questions?
We're getting very similar questions, as Dr. Ballum outlined. But one of the questions that we've actually gotten, which I need the backyard owners to understand fully. Some people have the concept that if they only have one bird or a couple birds and they're outside, that they're not susceptible to this particular virus. They are. And so you do need to take the same precautions, biosecurity precautions, as you would if you were a larger producer. So the birds are just as susceptible to the disease, and I think the viewers need to understand that.
Great, thanks. We've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's important to wrap up this first section. Dr. Ballum and Dr. Davison, why are we seeing so much this year compared with other years, and why is this a big issue? Dr. Ballum, would you like to start us?
Well, again, Dr. Davison is the expert. I'll let her answer the question more fully. But really, the single most important reason probably is that this particular subtype of avian influenza is highly pathogenic. And really what that means is that it's if you come in contact with it, there's a very high probability that your birds are going to get sick. And so that the biosecurity aspect of this that Dr. Davidson and others will talk about in this session are so important to try and help reduce the risk.
Makes sense. Dr. Davison?
And that is correct. This is a highly pathogenic virus, and that it has spread partially by wild birds and then area spread. I want the listeners and viewers to understand that this is an unusual situation, that avian influenza outbreaks that we've had in the United States, it's very rare to have a highly pathogenic virus. Usually when we've had a few other outbreaks of avian influenza, they have been of the mild type, of the low pathogenic type. So this is a very rare situation, and it has affected states throughout the United States. And so it is a serious disease, and it is highly pathogenic as it came to us as a highly pathogenic virus over in the over in the West Coast through the wild birds.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, Purina Animal Nutrition, where optimum nutrition is as important in their backyard as it is in yours. For healthy birds and nutritious eggs, Purina premium poultry feeds are developed in backyard setting like your own. They deliver balanced and complete vegetarian recipes with essential prebiotics, probiotics, and yeast to support immune health, made from freshly ground North American grains. You can learn more at healthyflock.com. Thanks again to Purina Animal Nutrition for helping make this event possible. Okay, we're back. Before we turn to our panelists, we're going to go to Alexandra Douglas. Alexandra has been called a poultry genius, but she prefers quail lady. She's profiled in the latest Backyard Poultry magazine and is here today to talk to us about her farm and biosecurity. Alexandra, can you first tell us about your farm?
Well, I am the owner of Stellar Game Birds Poultry Waterfowl. It was profiled in the magazine last month there. I am also known as the Quail Lady. I do love Coturnix quail. I graduated from Oregon State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal Sciences with a poultry and pre-veterinary emphasis. I also have 18 years of experience with avian care and bred at the age of 9 years old, finches and parrots. So I do have quite a bit of bird knowledge there. All of my knowledge from school and experience is applied to our farm. My partner and I specialize in high quality Coturnix quail and genetics within them. However, we recently became a diversified farm. Still specializing in our quail, however, raise more species now than we did before. We do raise chickens, ducks, geese, emus, of course the quail, as well as goats and tilapia, and our most recently added projects are rabbits. In the future, we do foresee cows and bees.
Thanks, Alexandra. You stay busy. What regular measures do you take with your flock regarding biosecurity, especially with new chicks, to help them stay healthy?
Well, we do raise a variety of species. Some are more zoonotic than others. We make sure each species are in their own areas to avoid cross-contamination. For example, quail and chickens are far apart from each other since chickens can carry diseases that actually can wipe out your quail flock. So it is not recommended to house them together, but my partner and I do split the chores up to keep the farm more biosecure. We do wear different shoes when dealing with the farm than when we go out to get feed or pick up animals. This does entail that one person does tend to rabbits, quail, and game birds, which is usually myself, and the other half handles the other farm. We do make sure that we do wash hands in between handling between species. That does not necessarily mean we have to handle, each time we pick up, each chicken from each pen, but we do make conscious effort to keep cross-contamination at minimum because prevention is key. We are making a more conscious effort to have foot baths because that will aid in more disinfection as well. We do make sure that the clothes that we wear on the farm is different than when we were, out of the farm. So if we do leave the farm for certain amounts of hours, we do come back and we make sure that we do change our clothes and get all cleaned up before going back out to the farm because once again, prevention is key. If we do have an animal that presents an ailment, we do quarantine it for at least 30 days to make sure that it's all clear before introducing it to the flock. This also is the case as when we do bring new members to the flock because being diversified, we do also want to have genetic diversity as well. So we do make conscious effort to have new animals far away from the other animals and quarantined as well.
What do you have an interesting story? What do you do if someone comes onto your land or tries to get in contact with your poultry without your permission?
We do keep a closed flock. Our information is on our website regarding to having visitors on the farm. There has been cases where visitors have come to the farm and we just nicely tell them that we are a closed flock. That doesn't mean that we're out of business or anything because that can be confusion. But we do ask them to leave and make an appointment for a further date. We don't want people walking around in the farm because we don't know where they came from. They may have been at a different farm prior, which can wipe out your own flock. And especially since we have many animals on the farm, one disease it's just better to have a more prevention status than to have visitors. But if we do have visitors, which is based on appointment, we do make a conscious effort for them to practice biosecurity. They get the knowledge prior to walking up to the farm. They do get booties. We make sure they do not touch the animals. And our customers do a really good job, paying attention to our policies.
Great. Thanks. What's the most common disease that you come across?
Currently, the most common disease being in Florida, it does get wet here, so mosquitoes do present themselves in the unkindest ways, and we get fowl pox. Now, fowl pox is nothing like chicken pox. Fowl pox does present itself. The bird does get little scabs and dots on them, looking like a human chicken pox, but it's much different. It is a virus, so it is untreatable. So it usually takes its course. However, the birds, they do look miserable, so they are still quarantined, so that we can pay more attention to them than the other birds.
Makes sense. And obviously it's important to, unless you're Dr. Davison or Dr. Bauman, have the resources at your disposal to seek help when you need it. When do you call in a veterinarian for help?
I rarely do get a veterinarian to come to the farm. They do know our biosecurity measures. If there is an emergency, such as if I need to know the dosage, because it's never good to just estimate how much antibiotics a bird needs, but I usually know, what the bird, what it's presenting itself, because of personal experience, as well as my pre-veterinary knowledge. But if I do need help, I do seek an avian veterinarian nearby, and I ask them for the proper dosage. The worst case scenario is I do have to sacrifice the bird, because one sacrifice can, save the whole flock if I am completely stumped and the bird does need autopsy.
Sure, that's the tough reality of this disease, especially. Thanks again, Alexandra. Alexandra is the author of Coturnix Revolution: The Success in Keeping the Versatile Coturnix. Everything you need to know about the Japanese quail. Thanks again, and thanks again to our panelists for joining us today, and everyone watching. We're going to turn to the last segment, which is really focused on biosecurity today, especially diagnosing and treating birds. This can be intimidating, especially for new poultry owners. And it's very important, though, to know at least the basics and know when to call for help for production and sanitary reasons. We're going to go back to Dr. Davison with Penn Vet. Dr. Davison, when should backyard poultry owners be concerned about a bird having a serious disease?
First, I'd like to address when you have a sick bird, what helps the veterinarian out and will help you out in determining whether you have a minor disease or a serious disease. Do separate that bird out from the flock. Put it maybe in a dog kennel. In there, you can see, is this bird eating and drinking? What do the droppings look like? Does it have respiratory disease? Is it laying eggs still? And all those key pieces of information we need to help make a diagnosis. When you're talking about a serious disease, when you think you have something serious, it's not just an individual bird. You may find all of a sudden all the birds stop eating, or there's a dramatic decrease in egg production, 50%, 100%, something that's dramatic that occurs suddenly. That's a key or a signal that something very seriously is going on. But also I want to let everybody know is that many diseases will mimic each other. So if you've got respiratory disease, it could be avian influenza, but it could be mycoplasma, it could be infectious bronchitis. There are a whole list of things that it could be. So it is important when you have a problem with your flock, really call a vet, but try to give them as much information as you can as to what the nature of the problem is by really observing what the birds are doing.
Great. And what if they bring that? What should they expect to hear from a vet?
When you come in to a vet, number one, they're going to do a history, exactly what I just indicated. They're going to say, is it respiratory disease? Is it a lameness problem? Are the birds not able to stand up? What are the droppings like? Are the birds eating? What type of food? So they'll go through a whole history. That's very important. Then what they'll do is a physical exam and figure out, is there something that they could see and feel on the bird that is a problem? Not everything is an infectious disease problem. It could be a parasitic problem, it could be a nutritional problem, it could be something that they got into. But with the history, with a physical exam, and then speaking with the owner, we could figure out which system are we actually looking at. And then we could do follow-up tests. We could do some blood tests, we could do some swab tests to determine what type of organism it is, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it is a nutritional problem or some parasitic problem, intestinal parasites. But that's what a veterinarian will do, go through history and then the physical exam and then determine what follow-up tests need to be done.
Thanks. It seems like the tricky part is really determining when something is minor and when something is a major. Could you review again, especially for flock owners, what you think is a good practice, for self-diagnosing your animals?
Well, I do have one caution with self-diagnosing. Again, when you have a problem, if it's an individual bird problem, separate that bird out so you can get some information on that bird. If you do have a serious problem, you need to contact a veterinarian. You need to, if you have a very serious problem where all your birds have passed away, really talk to the state veterinarian. So it is important that we actually communicate that if you do have a particular problem in your flock. But the signs of a very serious problem are dramatic decreases in production and with birds that have a high mortality. So it's very, very important to go ahead and contact somebody about that. And again, with this avian influenza, be well informed as to what's going on in the country.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Baum, we're going to turn to you for this question and go more toward the preventative side of things. What tips do you give backyard poultry owners for regular maintenance and health, and how important is nutrition in helping chickens fight their diseases?
Great. Well, certainly nutrition is important, and feeding a complete diet containing antioxidants, prebiotics, and probiotics is critical to health. However, as mentioned earlier, good nutrition needs to be partnered with sound management. And there are a couple important steps poultry owners need to take, and they've been mentioned before, both by Alexandra and Dr. Davidson. And the first thing is really keep your distance. That is, limit the exposure of your birds to possible vectors. And vectors are components that will carry the virus from where it is today into your birds. And so wild birds are important. Other wildlife in and around the coop area is another vector that could be a potential. So predator-proof your coop and run. Make sure you have a roof over your coop's run area because, again, a lot of the transmission is in the fecal droppings of wild birds. And so if you have a roof, that'll prevent the direct contact, certainly, of the droppings landing in the run area and then your birds picking it up. Again, visitors have birds of their own. Don't let them near your flock, nor do you approach somebody else's. The other critical part in terms of keeping your distance is maintain strict sanitation. Footwear has been mentioned before. I think that's also critical. Keep it isolated to the coop area. Don't take it anywhere else. Very simple techniques such as washing your hands with soap and water before you handle your birds or eggs, and certainly after handling your birds or eggs, I think are important. Washing feeders and waters on a weekly basis with a commercial detergent and a disinfectant. So the disinfectant, can potentially kill all the bacteria and other microorganisms that might come in contact. Again, something as simple as if you go to poultry shows, if you visit your neighbors or in and around areas that had poultry, don't return to your farm without cleaning your boots, cleaning the equipment that perhaps you brought back as well, and or changing your clothes. I mean, we have to recognize that all these are potential carriers, and I think if we can minimize the transfer, I think that will go a long way to reduce the potential risk of catching not just avian influenza, but any other type of disease or parasite that is common to chickens.
Sure. Thanks. That makes sense. We're going to start to wrap things up today with a couple last questions. We're going to finish the disease section with Dr. Baum and Dr. Davison. We've obviously, backyard poultry health is important to all of us. What was the one thing you'd like viewers to walk away today knowing and understanding about poultry health, biosecurity, this current outbreak, and generally just the spread of disease? Dr. Ballin?
Well, the one thing that I'd want to share is that we have to recognize that birds do not have to show the symptoms to be carriers of avian influenza. And a good example of this is in the wintertime. I go into work, nobody appears sick, but I end up going home with a cold. For a cold, I treat everybody as if they have a cold, and follow some, biosecurity measures that we've talked about, like washing my hands and things of that nature. And so my point here is this. I think if flock owners, we all assume that all birds are potential carriers, and then we follow the proper health and sanitation procedures, we can really help prevent spreading the disease or bringing it back home to our birds.
Dr. Davidson?
Again, I think we just need to emphasize the biosecurity aspect of this, and as Dr. Ballum indicated before about biosecurity, the other aspect is for owners really to contact a veterinarian, because many of those diseases, respiratory diseases, can mimic each other. So don't make the assumption that it is going to be avian influenza. It could be something else. And to consult with a vet, we do have other tests where we can determine what the cause of your problem is. But do get that data for the veterinarian by observing your birds, understanding what they're doing. But if you have a serious problem, call your veterinarian, and then also the state should know that there is a serious problem with your flock. We want to all maintain healthy poultry. Again, biosecurity is very, very important.
Great. Thanks again to Dr. Davison and Dr. Ballum. I just want to reiterate that this is not a human health issue. That's something we discussed early on, and that to summarize, that there are a lot of factors that contribute to a bird's health. But so if you don't know, don't be afraid to call for help. That's probably the biggest one. You can also contact us through our website, ask us questions, and our Facebook pages and social media. We're more than happy to help readers and the media who are attending this today with any questions to get the right information out there. As a bonus, I'm going to wrap this up by talking with Jeremy Chartier, a writer for us, a poultry expert, and a contributor at henclass.com. He's been raising poultry since 1995 and holds an associate's degree in animal science from the University of Connecticut. We're going to talk to him. He's been following this spread of the disease very closely this summer. We're going to talk to him about just the latest and greatest, I shouldn't say greatest, the latest this week, and as well as where people can get some good information as well. So, Jeremy, thanks for joining us today. And could you let us know kind of what's the latest this week before we wrap up, and where people can get some more information?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan, for having me. First and foremost, I have a lovely little graphic here to show you. This is the current situation we have now in North America. We've had 98 total infections to date. Only 12 of them have been backyard. The largest infection to date has been 3.6 million. Actually, it's 3.66 million layer birds. Currently, we have 13 states and 2 Canadian provinces that actually have this disease, and it's been spreading. But it seems to date that it's been stalling in the states that you see here, thankfully, and I have heard from USDA comments lately that they expect it to stall with the incoming weather, and I really hope that is the case. As far as what I use for my information and to keep a close eye on what's going on with this, I use the USDA's website at the aphis.usda.gov. And they have a website, a web page dedicated to all the infections and all the information that they're releasing officially. And sometimes these numbers don't always have everything, and they'll say, this is pending, and this hasn't yet been released, or we don't have quite all the numbers yet. And but for the most part, they're very good about updating it. And in the early stages of the outbreak, USDA has been kind of tight-lipped about it, or they just didn't have the time to put together the information or what have you. But now that we're really into this infection, the USDA and their counterparts in Canada have been really good about putting out numbers and giving us a real good idea of what's going on, keeping the public abreast of what's going on. And for Canadian Food Inspection Service is the other source that I watch, and they have an excellent website as well. As far as sources, that's really where I go to. And beyond that, that is our current situation.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. And obviously, everybody can find Jeremy's updates and all of our updates about the flu, the spread of the flu, at backyardpoultrymag.com. And in Backyard Poultry Magazine, our next edition, we're going to have a huge spread on poultry disease as well. So that does it for our webinar today. Thanks again for everyone joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Purina Animal Nutrition, and I'd like to thank our panelists, Alexander Douglas, Jeremy Chartier, Dr. Gordon Ballum, and Dr. Cheryl Davison. And I'd like to thank Pam Freeman and Steph Merkel for their work behind the scenes to make this all happen. We're going to have regular updates again on our website. Stay tuned, and we wish everyone a good day and hope everyone has a happy and healthy flock going forward.